In a startling sequence of events, California has been rocked by 3 significant earthquakes in less than 24 hours, triggering widespread panic among residents and straining emergency response systems. The rapid succession of tremors, occurring in different regions of the state, has left communities in shock and uncertainty as people brace for the possibility of more quakes. Buildings have been damaged, transportation systems disrupted, and residents are increasingly on edge as aftershocks continue to ripple through affected areas. A 4-magnitude earthquake has struck portions of Southern California in the early hours of Sunday morning. The earthquake occurred at 3 a.m. in Ontario, with its epicenter located near the Ontario International Airport, as reported by the United States Geological Survey. The earthquake was initially measured at a magnitude of 4.3, but was then lowered to 4, accompanied by many minor aftershocks. Residents said that the first earthquake struck in the early morning hours, jolting residents from their sleep in various parts of California. This initial tremor caused minor structural damage to homes and businesses, cracked roads, and set off car alarms across multiple cities. While it wasn't the largest quake in California's history, its suddenness and intensity left many residents on high alert. Emergency services quickly mobilized, but as aftershocks rippled through the region, anxiety remained high throughout the day. Later in the afternoon, a second earthquake struck with even greater force. This time, a magnitude 4 quake shook central California, sending shockwaves through towns and cities. By the evening, as residents tried to process the day's events, many reported that a third earthquake hit. As the ground continued to move, fear and anxiety spread rapidly through the state. The unexpected frequency and magnitude of the earthquakes have caused widespread panic, particularly in densely populated urban areas. Thousands of residents have said that they are thinking of evacuating their homes. Many residents expressed concerns over the safety of their homes and workplaces, especially those living in older buildings that are more vulnerable to damage during an earthquake. It's even been reported that families are starting to rush to emergency stores, buying up water, canned goods, and first aid supplies in preparation for possible aftershocks or further quakes. Local authorities issued warnings and urged residents to stay calm, but the sheer unpredictability of the situation has made it difficult for many to remain composed. In recent months, California has been gripped by a series of increasingly severe earthquakes, resulting in widespread panic, infrastructural damage, and a growing exodus of residents from the state. Ground movements have become more frequent and intense, causing significant disruption to daily life. As a result, the state government has declared a state of emergency, acknowledging the severity of the crisis and the urgent need for a coordinated response to the escalating disaster. The earthquakes and the uncertainty surrounding future tremors have prompted many Californians to re-evaluate their futures, with thousands opting to leave the state in search of safety. This mass departure highlights not only the immediate dangers posed by earthquakes, but also the broader social, economic, and environmental challenges that California faces in the wake of natural disasters. California, located along the Pacific Ring of Fire, has long been vulnerable to seismic activity. The San Andreas Fault, a major geological fault line running through the state, has historically been the source of significant earthquakes. However, in recent months, the frequency and intensity of seismic events have reached unprecedented levels. Minor tremors have become an almost daily occurrence, with larger quakes measuring upwards of 6 on the Richter scale striking various parts of the state. These quakes have affected both densely populated urban centers like Los Angeles and San Francisco, as well as rural communities along the fault lines. The ground movements have led to severe damage across multiple sectors, including transportation, utilities, and housing. Roads and highways have been fractured or destroyed, power grids have been destabilized, and water mains have burst, leaving entire neighborhoods without basic services. Many residents have been forced to evacuate their homes due to structural damage, while others face the threat of future quakes, rendering their properties uninhabitable. As the earthquakes continue, experts warn that the state may be on the brink of an even larger catastrophic event. Seismologists have long predicted the possibility of the big one, a massive earthquake that could devastate Southern California. While no one can predict exactly when this event will occur, the increasing frequency of ground movements has heightened fears that it may be imminent. This uncertainty has caused widespread anxiety, with residents unsure of how to protect themselves or when the next quake might strike. In response to the escalating crisis, California's state government has declared a state of emergency, mobilizing resources to manage the situation and prepare for the potential of even more severe earthquakes. Governor Gavin Newsom, in his official statement, emphasized the gravity of the situation, noting that the ongoing ground movements have already caused billions of dollars in damage and displaced thousands of residents. The declaration allows the state to access federal funds and deploy the National Guard, among other emergency measures, to assist with recovery efforts and public safety. The emergency declaration also includes directives for reinforcing critical infrastructure, setting up temporary shelters for displaced residents, and coordinating evacuation plans for those living in high-risk areas. Hospitals have been placed on high alert to deal with the influx of injuries resulting from the quakes, and emergency services have been stretched thin as first responders attempt to manage the widespread damage. While the government is working tirelessly to contain the situation, there is a growing recognition that even these measures may not be enough if the earthquake activity continues at its current rate. Seismologists have expressed concern that California's infrastructure, despite years of earthquake retrofitting and preparation, may not be equipped to handle the cumulative damage of ongoing quakes. Bridges, dams, and buildings that have withstood previous tremors are now being tested to their limits, raising fears of widespread collapses should a larger quake occur. In the face of increasing seismic activity and the uncertainty of future disasters, many Californians are making the difficult decision to leave the state. This exodus is driven not only by the immediate danger of the earthquakes, but also by concerns about the long-term viability of living in a region that may continue to experience severe geological instability. Families with young children, the elderly, and individuals with disabilities are particularly vulnerable, and many have decided that the risks of staying outweigh the emotional and financial costs of relocating. For many, the decision to leave is compounded by the fact that the earthquakes have already caused significant damage to their homes or businesses. Repair costs are often prohibitively high, and for those without comprehensive insurance, the financial burden can be overwhelming. Others are motivated by the desire to escape the constant stress and anxiety of living in an earthquake-prone area, where each tremor reignites fears of the big one. The earthquakes and resulting exodus have highlighted the broader challenges facing California as it grapples with the consequences of natural disasters. Socially, the earthquakes are contributing to a growing sense of insecurity and unease. Communities that have long been tied to the land through family, culture, or economic necessity are now facing the reality that they may have to leave behind the places they call home. For those who remain, there is an increasing sense of isolation as neighbors and friends depart. The recent earthquakes have sent shockwaves beyond the physical tremors, with anxiety and fear spreading rapidly across social media platforms. Many Californians have taken to Twitter to express their panic, describing the unnerving sensation of the ground shaking beneath them. Many have said that they've lived in California their whole life, and they think the earthquakes are increasing. Residents are also using social media to compare this string of earthquakes to the infamous big one that seismologists have long warned about. The fear that these quakes might be precursors to an even more devastating event is fueling widespread anxiety. Some users post maps and charts of fault lines, trying to predict where the next earthquake might hit, while others share articles and expert opinions on the potential risks ahead. The uncertainty about whether more significant earthquakes are coming has created a pervasive sense of dread that extends beyond California as people across the country watch the situation unfold. Social media has also become a place for people to share their personal experiences of the earthquakes in real time. The idea of the big one has loomed large in the collective consciousness of Californians and earthquake experts alike for decades. This hypothetical earthquake refers to a catastrophic seismic event that would occur along the San Andreas Fault, capable of producing widespread devastation across much of Southern California and the surrounding regions. While smaller tremors and moderate earthquakes are common occurrences in the state, the big one is feared for its potential to cause unprecedented damage to infrastructure, displace millions, and create a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions. Despite the uncertainty surrounding exactly when such an event might occur, scientists agree that California is long overdue for a massive earthquake. The inevitability of the big one continues to shape the way California prepares for earthquakes and how its residents live with the constant threat of disaster. At the heart of the fear surrounding this earthquake lies the San Andreas Fault, a 750-mile-long fault line that runs through much of California, from the Pacific coast to the Sierra Nevada mountain range. This fault line marks the boundary between two tectonic plates, the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate. These massive plates are in constant motion, grinding against one another as they move in opposite directions. The friction generated by this movement is responsible for California's frequent seismic activity. However, over time, this friction builds up pressure that can be released in the form of a large earthquake. According to the United States Geological Survey, the southern portion of the San Andreas Fault, which runs through densely populated areas such as Los Angeles, San Bernardino, and Riverside, is particularly concerning. Seismologists predict that this earthquake will be a strike-slip earthquake, in which the two tectonic plates slide past one another horizontally. Such an event would release an enormous amount of energy, likely causing the ground to shake violently for several minutes. The rupture could extend for hundreds of miles, with the potential to generate intense shaking across Southern California and even into neighboring states. The magnitude of the earthquake could reach over 8 or greater, making it one of the most powerful quakes ever recorded in the United States. In addition to the shaking, this earthquake could trigger secondary hazards, such as landslides, soil liquefaction, and tsunamis in coastal areas. Soil liquefaction occurs when saturated soils temporarily lose their strength and behave like a liquid due to the intense shaking, causing buildings and infrastructure to sink or collapse. Landslides could also bury homes and roads in hilly or mountainous areas, exacerbating the damage. While California's coastal cities are not typically vulnerable to large tsunamis, a massive quake could generate significant waves, particularly if it disrupts underwater faults. The potential impact of the big one on Southern California is nothing short of catastrophic. The region is home to more than 20 million people, and much of its infrastructure, including highways, bridges, and water systems, runs directly over or near the San Andreas Fault. In the event of a major earthquake, many of these structures could fail, cutting off access to critical resources and making it difficult for emergency responders to reach affected areas. In the immediate aftermath of such a quake, hospitals and emergency services would likely be overwhelmed by the sheer number of injured and displaced residents. Power outages, gas leaks, and fires could spread throughout the region, making recovery efforts even more challenging. The economic toll would also be staggering, as businesses, homes, and public infrastructure would require years of reconstruction, potentially costing hundreds of billions of dollars. Additionally, Southern California's reliance on imported water poses another major concern. The region's water supply is delivered via aqueducts and pipelines from distant sources in Northern California and the Colorado River. These systems run across multiple fault lines, making them vulnerable to damage during an earthquake. A disruption to the water supply could lead to severe shortages, compounding the humanitarian crisis in the aftermath of the disaster.